Has the D-line regressed? North Carolina D-line regressed this season. Obviously, Kamen Rucker's been a monster all year. Against a Georgia Tech team that's going to try to run, you're going to have a quarterback that can run the football. I think everybody got excited to see that they shut down Schrader, and Schrader could run the ball. But I think Haynes King's a whole different animal. Tell me about this defensive line for North Carolina going into this one.
It's an interesting question. I don't think they've regressed. I think it looks a little bit like they've regressed because they had 16 tackles for loss in the opener. Right? So here's a nice quiz. They had 16 tackles for loss in the opener. How many have they had since?
16?
Close.
You set the bar really high.
They've only had 24. They've got 40 on the season. 16 of them were in the opener.
Wow.
All right. So, I mean, you had 16, 4, 1, 5, 3, 6, 5. So it's not that they've regressed. There's a massive outlier at the beginning of the season that gave a different impression than what this team really is up front. Because if you start looking at the tackles for loss, which I think is generally a pretty good measure of how well a team is playing up front. It's not the only measure, but it's a measure that, is kind of a quick and dirty. They had 5 tackles for loss against Virginia and 6 against Miami. And those are the two highest totals they've had all season, other than that South Carolina game. So, and there was some concerning getting pushed around a little bit up front against App State at times. There was some concerning getting pushed around. I mean, have we forgotten the first quarter at Pitt? Right? They looked like a blocking sled in that first quarter against Pitt, and they eventually turned that around and managed to make some plays and win defensively there. But I think they are who they are, and I think maybe the most disappointing thing so far this season is that Carolina. I think the edges have played well. I think Rucker and Evans have been among the better edges in the conference. They both played really well, in my opinion. On my analysis. But I just think I think the defensive tackle play has been underwhelming from the jump, honestly. They've not gotten the difference-making defensive tackle play that they hoped for all season. You look at, I don't know what Murphy's numbers are here, but you look at, let's see, Murphy came into the season, you're kind of featuring him. The guy that he's now got 2.5 tackles for loss, 1 quarterback hurry. I'm looking at CFB stats here on the season. And for, a guy that you kind of expected to be maybe your bell cow defensive tackle coming in, that's underwhelming, right? And he's been, hot and cold, mostly sort of lukewarm. You go down the list and, Murphy has 2.5 tackles for loss. Tamari Fox has 1.5. And, you're just not getting a ton of production from that position. And, you'd hope that maybe a Travis Shaw would show you more than he has, but he hasn't. And, we talked about that possibility at the beginning of the year. Tommy, we talked about that he'd have to show more toughness than what we saw from him in camp. And I really think that's been a problem on this defense, has been that the defensive tackle position has been, just really average.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Jason, about South Carolina kind of being an outlier. I mean, if you look at what's taken place since then, South Carolina is tied for 123rd nationally in giving up 30 sacks this year. A lot of those were to Carolina. But that's been an issue for the Gamecocks all year long. This offensive line's not any good. When you contrast that with Georgia Tech, they're tied for 11th in sacks allowed. They've only given up 7 all year long, 7 in 7 games. So I don't think this is a game where you're going to expect Carolina to get many, if at all, any sacks. And then, tackles for loss will be a little bit different. But that's something to watch, obviously, is the line of scrimmage. I feel like, well, you can say it for every game, but what Carolina is able to do defensively at the point of attack is going to determine how this game plays out. Because Georgia Tech's offense is good enough, and we'll get into the specifics shortly. But if they can win consistently at the point of attack, it's going to be a shootout. And this is a game where the defense really needs to step up and slow down what Georgia Tech wants to do.
Greg, let's get into those specifics a little bit. We talked about Haynes King, and I asked Chad Bishop on the Next Level. If folks haven't watched the Next Level, it's out on YouTube. If you want to listen to these podcasts, it'll be right after this. The audio for that will be right after this on this same feed. Haynes King can make you pay. I mean, a 71-yard run from a quarterback is almost shocking to see. But he can sling it around a little bit, and they've got some receivers that can make some noise and a decent running back. So what does North Carolina, what are they going against, and what is the importance of this North Carolina defense stepping up, being exceptionally focused on Saturday, unlike last week?
Yeah, I think kind of a good way to look at it is, Garrett Schrader is what everybody kind of circles in terms of Carolina really shut down what Syracuse wanted to do. And Garrett's really kind of the main guy in that offense. That's not necessarily the case with Georgia Tech. Yes, Haynes King's the guy that kind of makes everything click. They've got several running backs that are really good. I think what's most surprising is, Georgia Tech's offensive stats are really impressive. We mentioned Virginia being so poor running the ball, averaging 3 yards per carry, 124th nationally. Georgia Tech's 23rd nationally at 5.1 yards per carry. And Haynes King is a big part of that, but he's not it. He's averaging 7.4 yards per carry. Jamal Haynes is their main guy, 5.6 yards per carry. Trey Cooley, 4.3. And those three guys have all rushed for, over 200 carries that they've carried the ball. So that's really a good option there. And then, I mentioned Georgia Tech not giving up many sacks. Haynes King is yet another guy, right? Another quarterback who, when he's given time, he's kept clean, he's really good. He has an 80.8 offensive rating when kept clean. Not very good at all under pressure, 37 grade, 37.3, which is pretty poor. And that's when he's been sacked. Obviously, is when he's under pressure. That's the only time he's been taken down. The thing with Haynes King, and this is where Carolina needs to capitalize, is that he is a turnover machine. And if Haynes King is able to stay clean in the pocket and play above, keep up with the chains, that's going to be a tough ask. But if you can get him under a little bit of duress and get him behind the chains a little bit, well, now you're going to have the opportunity to create some turnovers. The games that Georgia Tech has lost this year that are head scratchers, it's because they've lost a turnover battle by 2 or more. Bowling Green, they lost it by 3. Last week against Boston College, they lost it by 2. And so that's really the name of the game. So this is a good Georgia Tech offense that has potential to shoot itself in the foot, primarily because of Haynes King. So Carolina has you've got to be able to slow down the running game, and if you can do that, then you're able to kind of get after the quarterback and create some of these turnover opportunities.